Lovely. Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to talk at your North East Landlords conference. I would like to talk about void properties and vacant space. A quick introduction then. So my name's Helen Jones. I'm an authorising engineer for water for a company called Hydrop. Hydrop are basically consultants in the management of Legionella and water quality. So what happens when you shut the door? You shut the door on a property, you shut the door in a space, and you're not going to use it again for possibly a significant amount of time. So you turn your electric off, you flick the switch, you might turn your gas off, you turn a valve, and you make sure that all the taps are shut so you don't leak any water. But what happens when you then go back to that property or space and you then open the door again? You flick your switch, your electric comes back on, you open your gas valve, your gas comes back on, and open your tap and the water comes out. But when you open your tap and the water comes out, does it actually come out in the same state as that you left it? Unfortunately not. Water is not one of those utilities that stays the same when you turn it off, you leave it, and you turn it back on again. Water is a living entity and it contains many different variants of bacteria or bugs, like we like to call them. And the bugs like to grow in the water system, especially when it's nice and stagnant. The bacteria that we're really concerned about is Legionella bacteria, because Legionella bacteria can lead to Legionnaires disease. Now, Legionella bacteria is a natural bacteria that's present in all water systems. So it's present in rainwater, it's present in the lakes, it's present in the sea. Anywhere there's water, there will be Legionella bacteria. The most significant disease that Legionella bacteria causes is Legionella pneumophila. Trouble is with this Legionella bacteria, when it lives in the open atmosphere, it's at very low counts, and at very low counts, it doesn't cause these human diseases. Unfortunately, when we take that water and we then decide to store it, we heat it up, we cool it down, we put it in pipes, and we give the bacteria the conditions that allows it to grow to levels that can unfortunately cause harm. So what conditions does Legionella need to grow? Well, temperature between 27 and 47, the bacteria will grow. At 37 degrees, it will grow very fast. If your water is stagnant or slow moving, which it would be in one of your void properties or vacant space, the bacteria will grow. It's also quite a greedy bacteria, so it likes to feed on different elements within the water system. So if you have scale, or if your water system is a bit old and it's starting to corrode, you'll have dissolved iron in there. All of this will feed the bacteria. When the bacteria is allowed to grow, it will grow, and it will grow very fast. And it doesn't take long until it grows to a level that can cause human diseases. Now, there's various ways that this bacteria that's in the water system can get into the human body and cause a disease. The main route of infection is by inhaling the bacteria. You can also get the bacteria into your lungs by aspiration. So when you're drinking the water, if you cough or gag on the water, especially if you're lying down and you've got a hangover and you grab your glass of water, you try and drink it, you can cough on it. The bacteria can get into your lungs that way and cause the disease. Thirdly, there's intubation, which you won't be concerned about. But if you go into hospital and they have to stick tubes into your lungs to help you to breathe, you would like to think that these tubes are nice and clean and sterile. In certain cases, they're not. They're taken out of a patient, washed under a tap, and then used in the next patient. So there has been times where people have acquired Legionnaire's disease from being intubated in a hospital. But I think the main routes of infection that we'll be talking about will be inhalation and possibly aspiration. So you can inhale the bacteria from various different sources. Anything that causes splashing, there'll be an aerosol which can cause you to breathe the bacteria in. Taking a shower, obviously you're breathing in the shower, you'll be breathing in an aerosol that could contain Legionella bacteria. Flushing a toilet, this is why your wife tells you to put the toilet seat down before you flush it. We call them sneezing devices, because if you sneeze on someone, they will get covered with all of your bugs out of your mouth. If you flush a toilet and the toilet seat is up, you'll get covered with all of the bugs that are in that toilet as well. And obviously, we're not just talking about Legionella bacteria, we'll be talking about E. coli, coliforms, that sort of stuff. So it's always best that you put the toilet seat down, because if you put the toilet seat down before you flush it, that reduces the amount of aerosol by 80%. So it is a good risk mitigation technique. Obviously, if you're using other devices that causes an aerosol, you can acquire Legionnaire's disease that way. There used to be posh fountains outside all of the hotels. You'll find that a lot of hotels now have got rid of their fountains, and they've put pansy beds in the place. This is to mitigate the risks from Legionnaire's disease. You can't even escape if you go to the dentist. When the dentist drills your teeth, you know, they will be putting water directly in your mouth, causing an aerosol. If anybody's had any experience with birthing pools, I doubt anybody will probably use birthing pools in your properties. But it was only a couple of years ago where a little baby died just in Newcastle, because the father unfortunately had went on a website, got a birthing pool off the website, got it delivered, he filled it up from the hot tap in the house. It was a further 2 weeks unfortunately before the baby was delivered. When the baby was delivered, the first breath that it took was the water in the birthing pool. And a week later, unfortunately, that baby died of Legionnaire's disease. If you've got hot tubs, big risk. We call hot tubs human soup, because that's exactly what they are. You sit in a hot tub, the temperature of the water is at 37 degrees, so it's that optimum temperature that allows all the bacteria to grow. It's also a muscle relaxant, so all of your muscles relax. So when we were talking about the things that feed the bacteria, when all of your muscles relax, that includes your sphincter muscle. So bits out of your back passage leach out of you as well, and that gets into the hot tub and feeds the bacteria. You also sweat and all of your hair and fat comes off and ends up in the hot tub. There's also a club, if you go into a hotel, actually called the Hot Tub Club. And this is where people are egged on to do dirty things in hot tubs in hotels. So there's all sorts of excretions in there that feeds the bacteria. What you find as well is it's not just Legionnaire's disease that you want to be worried about when it comes to these hot tubs. There's also something called folliculitis, which penetrates the hair follicles and causes massive infections due to these hot tubs. So anything that basically causes an aerosol causes a risk. Trouble with drinking fountains is you never know who's drank out that fountain before you. So you need to be very careful when you use drinking fountains. But people always associate Legionnaire's disease with the big cooling towers, because that's the one that hits the news all of the time. But we know that cooling towers and these big industrial systems only account for 10% of the cases of Legionnaire's disease. Most cases of Legionnaire's disease are actually down to domestic water systems. So anything that contains water is a risk. So what happens if you acquire Legionnaire's disease? Well, basically it causes a lot of damage to your kidneys and nervous system, permanent damage if you do recover from it. But it does have a death rate of about 12%, so it is quite dangerous. But you can't catch it person to person, it's not contagious. You can only get it by breathing in the contaminated aerosol. So what does the law say about this then? So basically the Health and Safety at Work Act says that you have a legal duty of care to consider the risks from Legionella that may affect people in your care, and you must put appropriate measures in place to either remove or control the risk. So there's documents out there to help you manage the risks from Legionnaire's disease. This is called the Approved Code of Practice, or generally referred to as the L8 document. And the book has been designed for duty holders, which includes employers and those with responsibilities for the control of premises, including landlords. And there is a section in that book aimed at landlords who provide residential accommodation. So as the person in control of the premises, you are responsible for the water systems in those premises. In general, when the water systems are in daily use by a tenant, it should not be a problem. The problems occur when buildings become vacant or void. There's also special documents out there as well, specifically gained at the residential accommodation for the landlords. So basically what do you have to do? Basically you have to have a risk assessment. No matter how small or large your buildings are, you have to have a risk assessment. Once you've got that risk assessment, you must prepare a course of action to manage or control the risk. Once you've decided on your course of action, you just implement and manage the risk. But you always must keep records. If you don't keep records, then it'll be taken that it never happened in the first place. But why legislate for Legionnaire's disease? The bacteria in the water system, there are many, as I described. There's bacteria that causes folliculitis, there's E. coli, there's coliforms, there's things that make you feel sick, give you sickness and diarrhea. But why legislate against Legionnaire's disease? Well, basically it's because the Health and Safety Executive consider Legionnaire's disease to be a man-made disease. Because it's present in the normal environment, it's fine. It's when we take this water and we store it, heat it up, cool it down, and then don't use it, that it becomes an issue. But that can be managed. Therefore, the Health and Safety Executive say that it is a disease that is preventable. That's why it's legislated against. The trouble is, because there's legislation, it means there's also prosecution. So if you don't manage the risks, you can be prosecuted if somebody is harmed. How do you manage the risks? How do you stop people from acquiring Legionnaire's disease? You maintain your buildings so the bacteria in the water system is as low as possible. There will be Legionella bacteria in the water system, but as long as it's maintained correctly, it doesn't cause any issues. Temperature control is a good way of controlling the bacteria, keeping all of the hot water hot and keeping your cold water cold. Condition control, keep your systems clean. Don't have scale on the taps. Don't have corroded pipework. Try and keep the systems as clean as possible. But more importantly is keep the water moving. Keep it moving, because if you don't keep the water moving, you have no condition control and you have no temperature control. Because if water stops moving, the hot water cools down, the cold water warms up, and the amount of corrosion and scale increases. So without flushing your water systems when they're not in use, you have all of the ideal conditions that allows the bacteria to grow. Unfortunately, then when somebody comes and occupies that space and turns on the tap, they're at risk of acquiring Legionnaire's disease. We need to avoid dirty water coming out the taps, scale on the taps, because it eventually leads to this sort of thing. This is called biofilm, and this is where the bacteria grows to a certain amount where it's like Ghostbusters, it's like slime, and the slime comes out the taps. It's really hard to then get rid of, but then there's the increased risk of acquiring Legionnaire's disease. So we just need to reduce the risk, and it is very, very simple. Keep it clean, keep it moving, and keep it at the right temperature. If you can do that, people will be able to use the water system safe, and you can avoid prosecution. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Does anybody have any questions?